This video is already much angrier than I anticipated it being, but you know what? Honest reactions. Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I am here with my review and rant for The Hollow Kingdom by Clare B. Dunkle. So it's been a while since I did my first rant video, and well, after reading this book, it's definitely time for another one. I buddy read this book with the lovely Giselle Bradley, whom I will link down below. Okay, so normally I'm very careful about which parts of the video are spoilery and which parts aren't, but in this case, I don't really know what to call this video because the things I'm going to talk about are things that you can either figure out from reading the synopsis of the book, or they're things that I think you should know about the book before going in. Because I think if the things I talk about don't bother you, then you're still going to enjoy the book even knowing what's coming. And if the things I talk about do bother you, then I think you should know before you start this book. Because personally, if I had known about these things, I don't think I would have picked this book up in the first place. Also, there might be some swearing in this video because I am really mad at this book, so fair warning. This is about two sisters who are sent to live with their guardians in a very out-of-the-way sort of countryside area. There's a hill there that has been surrounded by folktales and mystery, and some of the locals still believe that there are goblins living in that hill. And of course there are. And the king of the goblins decides to take Kate, our main character, as his new bride. To steal her as his bride. And everything kind of goes from there as Kate and her sister Emily try to fight against the goblin taking Kate away forever to live under the hill with him. Okay, so I'll start with the things I liked first and just get those out of the way, because there were a couple of things I enjoyed about this book. I really liked the writing style, and I really enjoyed the folklore or mythology of this world. Like the goblin culture and the culture of other sort of magical beings was really interesting, and getting to know like the backstory of their kingdom and some of the individual characters was really interesting, and I enjoyed that. And there were also some times where Kate, the main character, showed a really impressive amount of intelligence and determination, and just really solving problems in interesting ways. There are a couple of moments in particular that I really sort of cheered for her as a protagonist because she was really clever and she wasn't going to take this lying down. So all of these things mean that I wouldn't necessarily discount reading something from this author in the future. I just think this book was not for me. Okay, so now into all of the things that I did not like about this book. For one thing, the characters just left a lot to be desired. My favorite characters in the book ended up being a minor character who spends most of the book as a cat and an enchanted piece of jewelry. So make of that what you will. I also thought that a lot of the plot was extremely predictable, and the parts that weren't felt out of place and unnecessary. There's this whole like random subplot that comes in the last like 40 pages of this book that just makes no sense with the rest of the story. And I'm also going to give a warning for animal abuse and implied human abuse and murder. It's just way darker than the rest of the story, and not in the kind of way that makes it feel like a dark and gritty fairy tale. It just sort of felt like the author didn't know how to end the book, so she just killed a bunch of people and threw something in at the end. But my main issue with this book was the central romance and Merrick the Goblin King as a character. So this is primarily a story about the two of them, about Kate and Merrick, and whether or not they will fall in love when he's trying to kidnap her and take her away as his bride. Now, I personally, after reading this book, feel like this was more of a Stockholm Syndrome story than a Beauty and the Beast story. And I know there are plenty of people who think that there's no way a relationship that starts out that unequal can turn into a healthy romantic relationship, and I totally respect that. I personally have read some Beauty and the Beast retellings or sort of stories that take that formula, and I've read some that were really well done and I really enjoyed and that felt like healthy or okay relationships. And I think one of the reasons that people enjoy the Beauty and the Beast story so much, like for example the animated Disney version, is the fact that Belle is still an important character. Things don't just happen to her. You know, she's intelligent and brave, and it's not like she gives in to the Beast. The Beast has to change too. Both of these characters learn about the other one, but it's not until he starts treating her better that Belle starts to fall in love with him. So all that being said, I wasn't like opposed to Merrick as a character from the beginning. I didn't think like, oh, he's irredeemable, there's no way we can come back from this. Because I have seen authors take characters who seem very bad on the outside and have them develop and change and become better people. So, we learned that Merrick and all of the Goblin Kings before him have to kidnap their brides. There's apparently no way that they can take a willing wife under the mountain with them. It has to be by force and against the girl's wishes, and that's just how it's always been. And we kind of get some reasons for this, but frankly they are pretty half-assed. Because we find out that the main reason for this is that it's just easier. Because the Goblin King needs a wife in order to have an heir, a son, and the only way that can happen quickly is if he kidnaps his wife and takes her with him. Because falling in love just takes too long. And Merrick sort of explains this to another character. And we're supposed to, I guess, empathize with his difficulty in finding a wife when he just grabs one and runs. Like, I think the author was trying to make it seem like he didn't have any choice, but instead I just had this bitter taste in my mouth about Merrick when he clearly is just trying to kidnap women because it's a little bit simpler for him. He actually says something like, well, what am I supposed to do? Just, like, talk to a girl and get to know her and hope that she falls in love with me? And it's like, yeah, maybe you could try that instead of abducting someone. And not just him. Every king ever has abducted someone. That's just how it is. Everyone accepts it. All of his subjects accept this. What? Oh, but this is why it's okay. Because we find out that all of these women before him apparently did fall in love, or more likely developed Stockholm Syndrome, and most of them went on to die cheerfully in childbirth, never having seen the sky again. How is that a happy ending? How are we supposed to think that's a romantic end for any story? Merrick doesn't have to treat Kate well, right? Because he knows that, like every single kidnapped woman before her, she will eventually fall in love with her captor. So there's no reason for him to even really try to become a decent person. And also, we never actually see Kate fall in love. We never see a substantial shift in her view of Merrick. Does this happen off page? Are we just supposed to assume that as time goes on and we're following these other like minor characters or getting some like world building stuff, are we just supposed to assume that all of this is happening in the background? Like, oh, just trust me, it's fine. She's starting to fall in love, but we're not going to tell you about it. So a perfect example of Merrick not having to worry about treating Kate like a person is the wedding ceremony, when Kate is predictably dragged down under the ground for the wedding. The whole thing reads like a really uncomfortable metaphor for sexual assault. She is shackled to the altar. She is forced to drink a potion that takes her voice so that she can't speak or even scream. And all of these things happen to her without her consent. And Merrick tells her that if she just accepts it, it will be better for her in the end. Less uncomfortable for everybody. And this whole ceremony is public and is cheered by the thousands of goblin subjects, and we're supposed to see this as, oh, like, that's a little tough, Merrick, but I see why you're doing it. Because Merrick goes out of his way to explain why all of these things have to happen, why it's tradition that the wife is bound and gagged before she is married forcibly to the Goblin King. He's like, well, we can't have people escaping, so what else am I supposed to do? And Kate thinks to herself, like, oh yeah, you know, this is tough, but makes sense, I guess. And like, no it doesn't. So she is shackled, forcibly married, the gag is then removed, so, you know, Merrick can be a decent guy, right? And he tells her he is going to have to keep her underground for the rest of her life. For, again, no good reason. It really doesn't seem like he had no other options. There has to be a spell where he could take her above ground and sort of give her some sight of the sky and not keep her in this basically tomb under the earth. It's very well decorated, but it's still like a glorified prison. Earlier in the book, Merrick actually puts a leash on Kate and drags her around like she's a fucking animal, and he makes a joke about it. He's like, oh, I don't want to pull you over a table, haha. Like, it infuriated me, and it's like we weren't supposed to think it was as bad as if a man were dragging a woman around by like a collar around her throat, because it was a magical leash? I don't know. It was still weird. It was still weird, so I don't know why that had to happen. It was supposedly so that Kate couldn't make trouble while Merrick was going about his other business and like trying to help her. Ostensibly it was for something that would help Kate in the long run, but there was really no defensible reason for yanking her around on a leash. I'm sorry, I just didn't think that was like justified at all. And in case we are in any doubt about how miserable most of these women have been, we find out later that most of them, or at least a very large number, have attempted suicide over and over and over in some cases. All of these women are clearly unhappy and desperate, and we actually hear about one who tried 6 different times to kill herself. But we're meant to believe that everything is fine because eventually she fell in love with her abductive husband and died horribly in childbirth. So, happy ending for everyone, right? Another big problem is Merrick never softens or develops at all as a character. He's despicable at the beginning and he's despicable at the end, and I just don't see where there was any character development, where there was any moment where we were supposed to think, okay, I see how he is becoming different so that I can buy into this romance between him and Kate. I actually have a quote from about not quite halfway through the book where he is talking about the elves, a different species from the goblins, and how they were basically too stupid to live. They were pretty, but they weren't good for much, but they made really attractive kidnapped brides. So after their race sort of started declining, he says to another character, "We hunted the elf women tirelessly after that, to get the good of the blood before it was all gone. Oh, an elf would tell you quite a tale of woe, with sadness written all across his pretty face. But it wasn't our fault they died out. They did it to themselves. Batty stargazers," he added with relish. Fuck off, Merrick. Just that image of him hunting them down like they're game is just like they're broodmares, because all they're good for is to marry and reproduce. All any of these females are good for. It doesn't matter if you're a human or an elf or whatever. All you are good for is to be kidnapped, married, and used to breed. That's it. And I just found that like so disgusting that I'm like, okay, this is gonna be hard to come back from this for Merrick to become a redeemable character, but maybe I'll be surprised. No, I wasn't. He was basically the same at the end. Another issue, when does Kate actually consent to having sex with Merrick? Because when they're first married, it's pretty clear that they're not sleeping together immediately after they're married, because that's one of the things we're supposed to believe makes Merrick and all of the other Goblin Kings okay, is like they don't force them to sleep with him. They just kidnap them, forcibly marry them, and wait for them to develop Stockholm Syndrome. This is an issue when we don't actually see Kate falling in love with him. And when are we supposed to imagine this, like, sexual part of their relationship started? I don't want a sex scene between them, but it would be nice to get some indication that she's actually starting to like him, besides one reference we get that his kisses are not as bad as she thought they were going to be. Like, how is that make a romance? And later on, Kate is pregnant, of course, because that's literally the only thing she's good for, so of course she has to eventually have a kid. And her being pregnant is what breaks Merrick out of this spell or something. It's not her love for him. It's not knowing his people are relying on him. It's knowing that he has finally managed to impregnate his kidnapped wife. Maybe that was supposed to be a sweet family moment, but that's not the way it read to me. Oh, and apparently the majority of the lower class goblins actually reproduce with animals. Don't think about that too much. And another reason all of this is just really depressing is the fact that it could have been fixed so easily. All the author had to do was make Emily, the younger sister, the one who the Goblin King fell in love with, instead of Kate. Because Emily is the one who's excited about living in the goblin world, and she's the one who thinks that Merrick is really charming from the beginning, and she's the one who's got this really, like, spunky and strong personality. And if Emily had been the one to fall in love with the Goblin King, maybe he still would have kidnapped Kate, but maybe we would have seen a relationship develop between Emily and Merrick instead of between Kate and Merrick. And that would have been such a fantastic opportunity to show that a willing bride, like a girl who agrees to marry the king and who is excited to be with all of the goblin creatures from the beginning, is a better option than dragging a girl underground and hoping for the best. It could have been fixed so easily and made for a much more interesting story that was less horrifying. So ultimately, I did not enjoy this book, as you probably guessed, and I gave it 1.5 stars. I will not be continuing the trilogy, and I really hesitate to recommend this book to anybody. Also, if you read this book and enjoyed it, obviously I'm not judging you. Totally fine. This is just my impressions from reading the book and my feelings about it, and the reason that I am not going to say I recommend this to people. So if you guys have read The Hollow Kingdom, let me know what you thought of it in the comments, or if you're planning on reading it, and I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!